Hi, everybody. It's Katie Joe, and I'm here with the Sovereign Soul podcast. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about past lives. Now, the Sovereign Soul podcast is actually here, and we talk about spiritual concepts and hopefully empower everybody listening to this to know that you have the spiritual authority and your own spiritual sovereignty to decide for yourself what is true for you. And knowing that ultimately no one knows what happens after we die. No one does, unless you're already dead. So, as morbid as that might sound. But the point is that we're all just doing our best, and whatever you can do to live in your own life that makes the world a better place, that brings you more peace, joy, and love, and creates more of that in the planet, follow that because we're all here to follow our own code. So let's talk a little bit about past lives. One of the things that I like to say a lot is that there's a lot more evidence for past lives than there is lack of evidence. There are stories all over the world where people remember past lives. There was this little boy, I know that he was on the news, and he could actually remember being an air bomber in an airplane in one of the wars in, I think, World War II. And he actually knew the cockpit, he knew his dog tags, he knew the secret information of where things were supposed to be bombed that the public didn't know. And here's this little boy, he remembered where he lived in the house, and all of these facts lined up. So, is that proof of past lives? We don't know. We don't know if past lives are real or not. What we do know is that that could be conveyed as fact. And this is one experience of many. There was another experience where there was a child, I don't know if it was male or female, that actually led people to his body from the previous lifetime where they had been murdered and identified his killer. And it all played out that way too. So when I hear the idea of past life, being raised in a culture and a religion that doesn't give any credence to that, it was all kind of just whimsical and funny and weird to me. And I would say that I didn't believe it, but I would also say that I didn't even take it seriously. It wasn't even something to consider whether I believed or whether I didn't. And I read a couple books just because somebody had recommended them. One of them was Many Lives, Many Masters. There was some books about past lives in hypnotherapy and therapists that would go under hypnosis, and people were remembering these past lives. So I began to, I don't know that I was still taking it seriously, but I thought that it was interesting. Now, for years and years and years, I always had this reoccurring dream, and I've written about this in two of my books, The Pathway of the Sage and, of course, Sovereign Soul. And I wrote about this dream that I would have, and I could see myself in Egypt. And I'll let that go into the story. You can read the book about that. But it talks about this chamber that I went into. I knew the clothes that I wore, and this was just a dream to me. Now, many years later, or in my early, I think, 30s, maybe late 20s, I met this man through this like business conference type of thing. And we weren't close, like there was hundreds of people there. And I was married. It wasn't a matter of being attracted to him, but he walked in the room and there was something really unique about him. In fact, to the point that I was like, I know this guy. And we couldn't figure out how we knew each other. We were just like, I know you, I know you. And we had all of these really interesting parallel things in our lives. Both of our parents were ballroom dancers. We had named one of our children the same name. We had even had a family dog, the same breed and the same name growing up. There were just all of these things that were really similar about both of us. And what was the most fascinating is in that room of 100 people or so, I could close my eyes and it didn't matter where he was sitting. I could tell you exactly where he was. I would be able to be facing one way, and everybody's coming into this conference because it was multiple weeks, multiple months over time. And if he walked in the door, I knew exactly if he was there and if he'd walked in the door. In fact, I was once at this conference center, which was an hour away from where I lived. And for context, this conference center was an hour north of me and an hour south of where this man lived. And I was at this conference for like this evening seminar type of a thing. And all of a sudden, I had this impulse that was like, so and so's here. And I stood up out of the conference area and I walked out into the lobby and I just knew he was there. And I looked around and I was like, that's weird. I just knew he was here. And I turned back to go into the conference, and all of a sudden he walks through the outside doors, and I go, "What are you doing here?" And because it actually was a women's event, I was like, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I was doing this work project. I was driving on the freeway, and I just had this impression that you were here, and I should stop and we should talk." So here this happened simultaneously. And so we just had a conversation. So it was really confusing for me because I couldn't understand this connection. I didn't know what it was. And then it wasn't until we were there doing like this charity event where we're in this kitchen, we're creating all this food for people. And I'm kind of paraphrasing this story, just there's a little bit more to it, but I want to get back to the like most essential parts. So we're preparing all this food for this group of people, and we're cutting these sandwiches and things like that. And a lady in the room, who was there helping, she said, "What is happening?" And I said, what are you talking about?" She was really like, had been sitting there observing the two of us as we're just coordinating, getting these sandwiches and stuff together. And she goes, "What is happening? You guys are not talking out loud." And so what was happening is that we were actually speaking telepathically, and here and there we would talk out loud and then not talk out loud. And this whole conversation's happening, and only part of it was out loud. And so she was trying to figure it out. And we didn't even realize we were doing that or that we were able to do that until it had been witnessed, because it wasn't, we were just communicating. And so we hadn't ever noticed that we sometimes used our mouths and sometimes we didn't. So somehow we have this conversation, and eventually he asked me, he said, "Do you believe in past lives?" Because he did. And I was like, I don't know. I'm open to the idea, but I don't know." He said to me, "I remember you from Egypt." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, we were priests, and this is what we did, and this is where we were, and this is what we wore." And it was exactly what I had been dreaming my whole life. So I didn't remember him from the dreams, but from him describing that lifetime that we had together, I actually became in that moment aware that past lives are possible. Like, is this just a concept or is this real? So he was identifying, it was identical to everything that I had seen many, many, many times. So that friendship we ended up both going our own ways. I mean, we both, this was just kind of a window of time in our lives. And I feel like the reason that he ended up coming into my life at that time was probably to awaken this part of myself that I didn't even know exists, because I had been so so stuck in the context of what I was raised with, and so inundated with, this is the way spirituality works, this is the way life works, this is the way everything else works. So now we're going to fast forward until now. So now I'm in these new age communities, and in these new age communities, the conversations of past lives are talked about all the time, as if it's a given, as if past lives are for sure, as if it's not even questionable. And I don't necessarily concede to that. I don't know if we live more than one lifetime. I truly don't. So here's where I want to get to, and here's what I want to discuss. This is the meat of it. We know that to create new life, to have a baby, that you have a masculine and feminine energy combined, meaning male, female, they combine to create a child. And then that child is coded with the DNA of both the masculine and feminine. And they bring in both. No death occurs. There's no destroying to create new. Now, in that child, in each and every single one of us, we have the genetics of every single lifetime that was ever lived to create us. I mean, if you run your ancestry, you can see, and they can track your genetics back for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and they can tell you where you originated from. They can go back all that way because those genetics are still alive in us, and they're all merged, and they're all connected, and they're all still there. So is it possible that we are accessing memories from one of those genetic codes, from the links, from all of that? Is it possible that we're reading the memories from the cells in our body? I think that's possible. I don't know, but I think that's possible. Another idea is that we don't just sit up on a cloud watching Earth and think, when's it my turn? Throw me in, coach. But that we're all part of the human experience from the beginning of the Earth being created, from every single human that evolved, even until now. And so we move in and we're energetically involved, whether we are what's called guardian angels or whether we're not, or whether we are just frequencies or awarenesses or impulses, we are there. And are we attending to our genetic line? Are we attending to, when we're in that realm, it would be our posterity, but when we're birthed, it's actually our ancestry. Are we all interwoven into that and paying attention? And so we have that awareness. Although we came to the physical realm, do we still have that spiritual awareness of everything that has occurred? And is it just limited to our physical, meaning our physical ancestry? Or are we also very, very woven into the things that we know we're going to come to life for? So if I feel like part of my life is I came down to earth to really talk about women's empowerment and really discuss about the value of the soul, and it's not determined by gender. So I feel like that's a part of my purpose. So before I come into this life, maybe I've lived many, many lifetimes and maybe I haven't, but I would think that energetically I would be woven in and being very aware and discerning of all different things that would be relative to me understanding, living, and knowing my purpose. So when I've studied hypnotherapy and specifically Dolores Cannon's work, under hypnosis, there's this idea of imprinting, and this means that many of us as souls will imprint into a lifetime so that we energetically understand that lifetime to the extent that can be understood because it's part of the work that we're here to do in the future when we come to earth and when we're born. And we can think that that's a past life, but it's actually an imprint. Now, in Dolores Cannon's work, and under hypnosis and all of our clients, the idea of past lives is very, very just understood. They just assume past lives are real. But in this one reading, it said, would you know the difference between a past life and an imprint? And under hypnosis, the guides and the angels that were there in that session said, no, you wouldn't. And so that's how we end up with a million Queen Elizabeths or a million King Henry VIII or a million Genghis Khans. It's because it's possible that we energetically entwine with that so that we can take that forward and absolutely understand what we need to know going forward into the life that we live. So there are no answers to whether or not past lives are real or are not, but I don't believe that this one life is the only life that we are experiencing.